nice to see you all. It's good to be back in New York. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I know you think I've been around long enough to know Adlai Stevenson the Elder, but he had a famous expression. He said, "Flattery is fine as long as you don't inhale." Well, I'm not inhaling. I just want you to know. It's great to see you all. I want to set the record straight. I came for one simple reason: Matilda Cuomo. Now, I tell you what, I was telling the Gov, he and I won the gene pool lottery. We were both raised by mothers that every kid in the neighborhood wished had been their mother. And I want to tell you, I was thinking on the way up, Matilda, I think I told you this when I saw you in the back, you got a great family, Margaret, the doc, and by the way, she's doing a hell of a job, and Maria, and I'm going to leave somebody out, Chris and Andrew, and I was thinking about this. You made it to the National Women's Hall of Fame, and I was thinking, just having Mario, Chris, and Andrew, you deserve it. You earned it. You earned it big. Folks, all the time, and I know as both someone who's run for public office a few times and had a son who ran and won for public office, it's a hell of a lot easier being the candidate than having someone you love and adore as part of your soul be the candidate. It's hard to stand there and watch. It's hard to stand there sometimes when they're under assault. But I tell you what, you have been, as that old song goes, you've been the wind beneath their wings. You've done an incredible job, I tell you. Thank you. Thank you. You know, just like his son Andrew's father, Mario, had a big, expansive heart. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again publicly again, but I said it over 12 years ago. I've been involved in public life for a while. I've met a number of really impressive women and men. There's only one that I ever met that I looked at and it reminded me of my days back playing football. When you look across the eye and you look in the eye of the linebacker, he'd look at you and you knew whether he knew that you knew he could kick your rear end. Well, Mario Cuomo was the only person I've ever been engaged with politically I thought was better than me. And I mean that sincerely. And that sounds like a strange thing to say, because if you have to, when you run for office, you have to believe you have a capacity to do something good. And whenever I see Andrew, I think of my son Bo. They served together as attorneys general, and I'm eternally grateful, Andrew, for your friendship to my son Bo. You each bore a heavy burden, having fathers who were relatively well known. One of the truest things George W. Bush ever said was, they said, well, what's it like having your father as a former president? He said, well, one thing I know for sure, I inherit all his enemies and only some of his friends. So they each bore a heavy burden. But my dad had an expression, and he really did. He'd say, you know your success as a father when you turn and look at your child and realize they turned out better than you. Both Mario and I have been successes. And I think, if you excuse the point of personal privilege, as we used to say in the Senate, that our families have a lot in common. We were raised in homes, one Italian, one Irish, where we were taught that the greatest sin anyone could commit, and I mean this literally, was the abuse of power, whether it was government abusing power, or the abuse of economic power, or physical power. It was the ultimate sin. We were taught we had an obligation to speak out and speak up when we ever saw that abuse, because everyone and I mean everyone, is entitled to be treated with dignity. We're taught that no one's better than us, but everyone is our equal. That we can be anything we dreamed of, and that ordinary people can and have done extraordinary things. My mom used to say courage is the greatest virtue of all, because upon it rests every other virtue. Used to say, without courage, you can't love with abandon. My dad used to always talk about dignity and the dignity of work. When we moved from Scranton when I was a kid, because there were no jobs, if you listen to Barack, you'd think I climbed out of a coal mine in Scranton with a lunch bucket. But my dad was a white-collar worker. There was just no one to sell anything to after the economy collapsed. We moved to Delaware. But my siblings and I heard, if we heard it once, we heard it 20 times. He used to say when anyone would lose a job, he'd say, Joe, remember, a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. That's what we're taught. We're taught that, like all of you, that everyone, regardless of their religion, their culture, their national origin, their race, their gender preference, they deserve to be treated and given a shot. And if given a chance, just a chance, the American people have never, ever, ever let their country down. Andrew learned these lessons at his father's table in Queens, and I learned at my grandpa's table in Scranton and my dad's in Claymont, Delaware. You know, when it gets right down to it, it's all about decency and respect, which is so lacking in our politics of today. It may seem strange to quote a conservative columnist, but David Brooks, I think, said it best. He said, there's an invisible moral fabric in America that holds up our society, allows our Constitution to function. That moral fabric consists of customs and norms that have allowed us to be the nation we are: decency, honesty, dignity and respect, giving hate no safe harbor, leaving no one behind, and understanding that as Americans, we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. Most of what we learned was by watching our parents. I suspect the same for you. They taught by example, and so much of it became clear it wasn't complicated. I remember watching your husband, Matilda, in a debate. I can't remember which office it was for, but it was a debate, and I think it was a governor's race. And he was on a stage, and there were bleachers, like 4 or 5 rows on either side of him, because those are the folks who were going to ask questions when the debate was finished. And the governor turned, maybe he wasn't governor, and I can't even remember, but Mario turned and took a question from a man in the top row. A vivid memory. And the guy said, I understand, I'm paraphrasing, I understand that you are really soft on homosexuality and gays. And your husband looked at him and said, what would you do, sir, if your son came home and said he was gay? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, I'd kick him out of my house. And he said, what I would do is I would hug him, give him a kiss, and tell him I loved him. That was before anybody was talking about it. Everybody talked about evolving. I remember when I was 17 years old, stopping to get an application to be a lifeguard in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware, which is a big public swimming pool in the black community. As I got out of the car, my dad was dropping me off, and two guys in the corner, if you know anything about Delaware, the corporate capital of the world is a place called Rodney Square, where the famous Chancery Court is. and two gentlemen dressed in suits leaned over at that stoplight and kissed one another, one in a different direction, one to the DuPont building, one to the Hercules building. And I turned and looked at my dad. And all he did was look at me and said, "It's simple, honey. They love each other. They love each other." The most complicated things about human interaction have never been really complicated the way we were raised, nor have they been all that complicated for the Democratic Party, because we've been made up of, we know why we're who we are. You can't define who an American is based on their race or ethnicity or culture, anything, other than a basic, unarticulated commitment to a value set. As corny as we hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal. That's not how they'd say it. But they know. They know what's made us who we are. And folks, the fact of the matter is, think back. What made you become a Democrat in the first place? What made you choose? Maybe you were born into a household that was a Democratic household. Maybe a lot of reasons. But why did you stay a Democrat? Because you basically believe everybody is entitled to be treated fairly. Basically because you think that everybody deserves a shot. And you think ordinary people can do pretty extraordinary things. You know, I kid and say if there were a Constitutional Convention held again today, and the representatives were from the congressional parties, and there was a motion saying that no one could vote in America unless they had a college degree, my guess is the Republicans would vote for it. They don't have much faith in ordinary people. And they demonstrate by the way they act, they don't care a whole lot about it. They don't understand why we're who we are. And you know, I grew up imbued with the notion that the middle class is not a number. We used to have these debates with some of the economists who worked for me in the White House. You'd say middle class, they'd say $50,240 or $53,000. That's not middle class. Middle class is a value set. It's being able to own your own home and not have to rent it if you have a chance. It's being able to send your kid to a park where you know they're going to come home safely. Send them to a local public high school that if they do well, they can get into college. If they get to college, somehow you'll figure out how to pay for it. And being able to take care of your geriatric mom after your dad dies, and hope your children never have to care for you. That's what the middle class has been in America. And guess what? We know the neighborhoods we come from, nothing's guaranteed in life. But one thing we do expect is government exists to guarantee that there's a level playing field, that everybody gets a shot. Just a shot, no guarantee. None, just a shot. And that's receding for an awful lot of Americans, that shot. There's a lot of reasons why I'm a big fan of Andrew's. One of them is we both own Corvettes. Mine's a 67, his is a 75. I think I can kick it. Anyway. Mine's better looking. I got mine ferrying cars back and forth from the Mannheim Auto Auction to make money on the weekends to fill up people's lots in the dealerships in Delaware. And he took care of his working in a garage in Queens. We still drive them. we still maintain them. I was asked by somebody about 6 months ago why I still drive the car. My son's had it rebuilt. My son Bo, before he died, had it, the engine rebuilt. And I said, because it reminds me. I said, what does it remind you of? It reminds me of the notion of possibilities. Anything's possible. When I was a kid, the idea that I could own a Corvette was viewed as impossible. It took me to law school. But it's about possibilities. That's what I love about the party. But I'm worried we're losing it. I've spent more time with Xi Jinping, the leader of China, than any world leader. I've had 25 hours of private dinners with him around China, 17,000 miles traveling them in, about 5,000 miles traveling with the United States, with just he and I and an interpreter, simultaneous interpreter. And we're in a town called Chengdu on the Tibetan Tibetan Plateau. And he looked at me and said, can you define America for me, Mr. Vice President? And I said, yes, I can. In one word, and I mean this sincerely: possibilities. Unlike any other nation in the world, we have fed off the notion that anything is possible in America, anything at all. And that's not hyperbole. That's who we are. Anything is possible. And folks, it takes women and men with some vision to remind us who we are, remind us of what is possible. I don't have to tell anyone in this audience that all the values I just talked about are under siege by this administration. This is not your father's Republican Party. This is a different deal. They are not who we are. They're not who America is. But what they are doing is they're sending a vision of America around the world that's distorted, that's damaging, that is hurting us with this phony populism and this fake nationalism. It's designed, instead of having governor do his job, it's designed to be able to step back and let the wealthy and the powerful control, and then blame it on the other, the immigrant, the black, the woman. That's what this is about. And that's everything that you are not and everything Andrew is not. That's not who we are. We have an obligation. In my view, we have an obligation as a party. Woodrow Wilson said it best. He said, a party is worth no more than that for which it stands. So what do we stand for? What do we stand for? Because the American public, as much as they don't like the present administration, I want to hear a definition again of who we are. And we're being told by many that we have to make what I call a false choice. Do we yield only to our progressive values, or do we work on those things that affect high school educated working people who are under siege, as if they're different? Where I come from, there is no difference. You don't have to choose between your heart and your soul. It's a phony debate. Folks, in the 36 years that I sat in the United States Senate, I was rated, depending on these rating agencies, between the 4th and the 7th most liberal member of the United States Senate. So I take a backseat to no one on my progressive values. No one. Zero. No one. I got involved in politics because of civil rights. I stayed involved in politics because of women's rights. I've been involved in politics because of the abuse of power internationally. So I take a backseat to no one. And by the way, Andrew Cuomo has never backed away from his progressive principles, not one single time. And at the same time, he's able to do what we seem to have forgotten. Focus on the needs of high school educated, hard-working people who get further and further behind. The income gap in America is worse than it's ever been since 1915. Democracies cannot be sustained with that kind of difference in everything he's done. But we make it sound today in some of the debates around the country, and I think I've gone into more races since we got out of office than any other single person, because I made a commitment when I decided not to run that I would do everything in my power to win back the House and the Senate and the governor's seats around the country. And I want to tell you, most people out there, like New York, they understand there's not a distinction. There's not a distinction between our fundamental progressive values and the needs, the practical needs of hardworking people. You know, just look at his record. He, along with all of you, legalized marriage in the United States of America, in the state of New York, long before anybody and most people even wanted to talk about it. I already mentioned the most comprehensive state-paid family leave program in the nation. Why? That goes to standard of living. Remember coming up here when he started the effort for the national debate on raising the minimum wage. We were debating about the minimum wage being raised to $7. You said 15. You did it. You did it. When the Republican Party is cowered by the NRA, their handmaiden, they send their sympathies to those thousands of people who are killed needlessly every year. They very proudly, in the Bush administration, struck down something I worked for 10 years to get done, and it got done, and it only lasted 10 years because I had to have it, when I got it passed, eliminating assault weapons, making sure that there couldn't be background checks, the whole thing. Most comprehensive gun control in the history of America. And but for a couple of hanging chads in Florida, it would still have been the law. But what happened? When every other governor is around going, oh, I know, I care so much. What did Andrew and what did you do? You took them on and you beat them. You beat them. You know, it's all about giving hard-working folks just a fighting chance. And to have a fighting chance, you have to have access to a decent education. You have to have access to be able to live in a safe neighborhood. You got to be in a position where you can just do your job and make it. You know, in this country, there are over 24 million people who are the equivalent of making hamburgers who have to sign non-compete agreements. Can you believe that? Or the majority of the Fortune 500 companies actually in your contract make you commit that you will not discuss your salary with anyone else in the corporation? What possible economic rationale is there for that, other than to deprive ordinary, hard-working people their ability to bargain for their worth? You know, the thing that changed America was the turn of the 20th century, 19th century, 20th century, called non-means tested, free education for 12 years. The first industrial nation in the world to provide that. Allowed us to leap ahead of all the rest of the world. The rest of the world's caught up. We're in the midst of a fourth industrial revolution, digitalization, Moore's law, artificial intelligence. An awful lot of middle-class folks, your parents, maybe some of you, are wondering whether or not there'll be a job, a middle-class job for me in a year or 2 or 3 or 5. I grew up in a little steel town called Claymont, Delaware. A guy I grew up with, went to grade school, Holy Rosary with. He went on to the public high school. I went to the Catholic prep school. He didn't go to college. I did. But he was an independent trucker. His name is Tony. I saw him at Christmas time. I said, Tony, how you doing, pal? He grabbed my cheek, and the Secret Service nearly shot him. He said, Joey. He said, only guys like you never worked in their life can still be working. He was an independent trucker, maybe between 80 and 120,000 bucks a year, busting his neck. His son does the same thing. I said, how's Tony? He said, he's in trouble, Joey. I said, can I do anything? I thought maybe he was ill or something. He said, no. He said, he's driving Joey. But he said he knows he's not going to have a job in 5 years. Even some in our party have become so elitist. We don't think ordinary people understand what's going on. Because in 5 years, supposedly, they're going to be all driverless trucks. That's how the highways are being built. So here's the guy, busted his neck his whole life, has 4 kids, lives a middle-class life, and wonders, what am I going to do in 5 years? We got to talk to these people. We got to listen. Do you realize there's about 150 to 200,000 people no longer in sales that made an average of $43,000 a year just in the last year and a half? Because of a thing called Amazon? I'm not saying you stop progress, but guess what? All of a sudden, they have no job. They have families. They played by the rules. Do we talk to them? Do we tell them what we can do? My dad used to say, I don't expect the government to solve my problems, Joey, but I expect them at least to understand them. At least understand them. So folks, if we were setting up an education system today, would anybody say that 12 years is enough? Raise your hand if you think 12 years is enough for the 21st century going into 2020. I did a report for the President. The President used to love the State of the Unions because he got to surprise me every damn one. If you notice, he'd always turn and say, and Joe is going to do. Never tell me about it. One of those years, the 5th year, and he said, Joe is going to do a study on jobs of the future. Okay, Mr. President, no problem. Or Joe's going to do the moonshot. Or Joe's going to do the Recovery Act. The good news is when he gave me those jobs, he gave me the authority to do them. But the point is this. 6 out of 10 jobs by the year 2020 require something beyond a high school education. 6 out of 10 jobs, only going to increase. The rest of the world and the United States of America twiddles its thumbs and wonder, what should we do? And this administration cuts funding for college and cuts student aid programs and all the rest. But what's your governor do? You stand up and talk about the Excelsior Scholarship. You're doing what we should be doing as a nation. College should be free. Free. State universities. And by the way, we can afford it. You're doing it here in the state. By the way, if you let every single person that qualified in America to go to community college, you'd cut the cost of college in half. It would cost $6 billion a year. You'd go from 6 to 9 million people in community college. You'd raise the GDP by 0.2% per year. You say, oh my God, there goes that big spending Democrat Biden, another $6 billion for 4-year college and state universities. It's around $40 billion. Guys, there are $1.34 trillion in tax expenditures out there. Fancy word for saying loopholes. I challenge anyone to justify based on the rationale for them either promoting a social good like charitable contributions or generating people taking chances to create productivity like capital gains. I challenge anyone to tell me how more than $800 billion is justified. If I eliminated one, just one, I didn't know it existed. When I did my financial disclosure as vice president, a lot of my colleagues got a kick out of the headline in the Washington Post that said, quote, "It's probable no man has ever assumed the office of vice president with fewer assets than Joe Biden." Because I made a commitment I'd never own a stock or a bond, I'd never be involved in a business venture, I'd never accept an honoraria. I kept the promise, and I sent my kids to private universities, and my net worth is what it was when I started, $55,000 to $150,000. But here's the point. I didn't know a thing called stepped-up basis. I hope you do. I do now. I sold a book. But here's the deal. If you make a capital gain, and God forbid you're on your way to turn it in, and you get hit by a truck, gets left to your daughter or son, they pay nothing. It's not inheritance tax. It was a tax due 2 minutes before you died. Nothing to do with inheritance tax. It's worth $17 billion out of that $1,340 billion. Just $17 billion. If you eliminate that one thing, I could put every single solitary kid in community college, increase the GDP by 0.2%, and have $11 billion left to reduce the deficit. Don't tell me we can't afford to take care of the middle class. And don't tell Andrew. Folks, you guys did all this, and he did all this along with Lieutenant Governor while improving the state's economic stability. Today, New York has over 8 million private sector jobs, more than any time in its history. The $10 billion deficit has been wiped out. This guy has vision, too. The Tappan Zee Bridge, built fast, under budget. You know, it wasn't too long ago, Vice President ruffled a few feathers when he said something about LaGuardia Airport. I took a little heat for that. Well, what I said was true. The greatest city in the world cannot have third world airports. And so it made everybody mad. 2 weeks later, I was landing in Air Force Two at LaGuardia to do an event in the city, and the Air Force Two pilots called me up front and said, "Is it safe to land, Mr. Vice President?" No, not a joke. So we landed, and I came back, and usually there's law enforcement officers wanting their picture taken as we go up the steps. So there were 9 guys and women in those brown suits with a big reflective yellow tape around them, and I thought, oh, geez. I walked up, and the head of the union put his hand out and said, "Mr. Vice President, we heard what you said about LaGuardia." And I thought, oh, God. He said, "You're right. You're right." Well, look what you guys did. Look what the governor did. Took the effort to take this and 5 other airports, make them world-class airports. And guess what? In the process, creating thousands of middle-class jobs, increasing opportunity, bringing more folks to the state of New York. It's not rocket science, guys. It's not rocket science. We used to invest 4% of our GDP in infrastructure. We now do 0.2%. We're ranked 29th in the world in transportation. Look at China. God almighty. Well, folks, I'm going on too long, but I feel passionate about this. Let's face it, folks. Let me conclude by this. I admit, I have a deep personal friendship with Andrew and Chris, and if you excuse me for saying so, with you, Mom, as well. And so I'd do anything I could to justify coming to help. But this is an easy lift. This is an easy lift. Folks, there's a lot of ugliness in our politics right now. That means we're going to have to fight for the vision of the nation we know is possible. You know, one of the great things about coming to New York State is seeing, as corny as it sounds, the Statue of Liberty when you fly in. You know, it's a remindership that leadership isn't just about new airports and building bridges. No, the oldest vision in America is actually quite old. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. You say it so often, you learn it in school. It's like rote, but it's real. I mean, it is real. I was in Mumbai, India, as vice president, meeting with their industrial community, and I got a call from a guy named Lee Kuan Yew, former president of Singapore. And he was referred to as the Henry Kissinger of Asia. He wrote extensively on the future of Russia, the United States, China, and India. And he called and asked whether I'd stop and see him. He was 92. He died about 5 months later. And I was sitting with him, and we were talking about how rapidly Xi Jinping had consolidated power. This was at the time, remember that aircraft went down the Indian Ocean, never found the black box? And as I sat with him, I turned to him about 10 minutes into the conversation, and I said, Mr. President, what is China doing now? I meant organizationally. And he said something fascinating. He said, China's in America looking for the buried black box. I looked at him like you're looking at me, like, what in the heck are you talking about? He said, they're looking for that box that contains the secrets that allows America to be the only nation in the history of the world ever to constantly be able to remake itself. The only nation in the world. And without one scintilla of exaggeration, I looked at him and I said, Mr. President, I'm old enough now to tell you what, if they find that box, what they'll find in the box. Two things. In America, no kid, no matter how good or bad a school they go to, is ever criticized for challenging orthodoxy. The way we make new things is we break old things. Nothing about the past is sacred if we can make it better. I said there's a second thing you'll find. From the late 1780s on, a constant, unrelenting wave of immigration from all parts of the world, occasionally interrupted by xenophobic instincts. He looked at me like I said something about a black box. He said, how's that? And I said, we've been able to think about this. I mean this sincerely. We've been able to cherry pick the best of every single culture in the world over the last 300 years. When my great-great-great-grandfather got on a coffin ship off the Cooley Peninsula in Ireland, George Finnegan got off, or Owen Finnegan on that ship. It took an enormous amount of courage. It took an enormous amount of optimism. It took an enormous amount of determination. There's a family probably in Guadalajara right now, sitting around a hand-hewn table. And the father's saying, I got a great idea. Let's sell everything we have. Give it to a coyote. They'll take us across the border, drop us in the desert, and the country doesn't want us. Maybe put us in prison. Won't that be fun? Think of the background of each of your families. It took courage. We got the best of every culture. We got people with determination, optimism, commitment, unrelenting competitive spirit. That's what made us who we are. And I might add, we're the only industrial nation in the world that has a constant supply of new labor. Europe is in trouble. China. I got in trouble during the Romney campaign for predicting that China would drop its one-child policy because they could no longer compete. They went to 2 children, now 3, because they're xenophobic. They cannot bring anyone else in, and they have more people retiring in the 2020s than working. They can't compete. Ladies and gentlemen, it's who we are. All just to give future generations a shot at the possibilities that exist here. It seems to me that's our obligation, to keep those possibilities alive and real for people. I think that's what the governor, lieutenant governor, all of you have done. Let me conclude by saying that when I got elected as a 29-year-old kid to the Senate, I wasn't old enough to be sworn in when I got elected. I had to wait 17 days to be eligible, be sworn in. And I was always referred to as the idealistic young optimist. Well, if you recall, the 8 years as vice president, whenever they read about the White House, they'd call me the White House optimist, like I was the new guy in town. I am an optimist because I've seen the history of the journey of the American people. And I give you my word as a Biden, I'm more optimistic today about America's chances in the 21st century than I've been any time in my entire life. And let me tell you why. We have the greatest agricultural resources in the world. We feed the world. 40% of China's arable land is polluted with cadmium. We are the most productive workers in the world, 3 times as productive as workers in Asia. We have the strongest military in the history of the world. We're the epicenter of energy for the 21st century. Not the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, not Argentina, not anywhere else in the world, North America. And by 2022, we'll produce more oil than any nation in the world, including Russia. And we have the ability to make sure that 50% of all the energy produced in the United States of America by 2030 is renewable energy. It's all within our wheelhouse. In addition to that, we're in a situation where we have more great research universities, now listen to me, than all the rest of the world combined. The entire, not a joke, because of a Republican, a guy named Dwight D. Eisenhower. When Sputnik went up, he set up what we'd never do today. He called it 20 Wise Men Committee, a 20 wise person committee. And they said, invest in massive research investment in the government agencies. He said, no, we'll do some there, but let's invest in our college system. So look at, name me a single world-changing invention or discovery that's occurred in the last 20 years that didn't come out of the United States of America. Name me one. Name me one that has China or France or Russia or India stamped on it. It's because of our research universities. We have the best minds in the world. And folks, it's about time we pick our heads up. Remember who the hell we are as Americans. We can do anything. And it's time to get these guys out of our way. It's time to lead. And it's time to say, no more. We are moving on. We are changing the politics of this country. We are taking back control. God bless you all. Thanks for listening. Thank you. I mean it. It's ours. Take it back. Every time I'd walk out of my grandfather Ambrose Finnegan's house, he'd yell, Joey, keep the faith. And my grandmother yelled, no, Joey, spread it. Go spread the faith. Re-elect Andrew. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Who's gonna work for the working man? For the working man. Get your hands in the dirt. Who's gonna work for the curse? Brother, I'll be damned if I don't raise a hand. Who's gonna work for the working man? Working man.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow, what a convention. First, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for your vote. I thank you for your support. I thank you for your friendship. I will not let you down. Thank you. 95%. I never got that in school. Thank you. It's been a great convention, and let's give a big round of applause to Chairman Byron Brown and the whole team that worked so hard to get it organized. Jay Jacobs, Mike Reich, everyone who made this possible. How about that Joe Biden? I love Joe Biden. He is the heart and soul. He is the heart and soul of the Democratic Party, and he really has been fantastic. A couple of points that I just want to clarify. He made a comment about his 67 Corvette and my 75 Corvette. He's right that the 67 is a better looking Corvette than my Corvette. That is true. He then went further and suggested that his car would actually beat my car in a race. And that was a low blow. And he doesn't know what I have under the hood. So I'll give him better looking, but he is not going to beat me down the quarter mile. That I can promise you. We had Tom Perez, the chairman, who was all fired up. And boy, is he a great spokesperson. Hillary Clinton, wasn't she great? And what a difference it would be if she was president of the United States. Speaker Carl Hastie was magnificent in his comments. He was generous in his comments. He's right. I sat next to him in many budget discussions. He is a true believer. He's committed. He's a great negotiator. He's a great advocate. But he is